Again. Now we are recording. So before we begin the meeting, there are a few rules as to how we will conduct votes and public comments during this council meeting. First, we want to make sure everybody understands that this meeting is being recorded and is live streamed on Facebook. All votes will be conducted as a roll call vote by our executive assistant, Nancy Ward. And then we have several public hearings tonight. And if people wish to comment during the public hearings, there are a couple different ways to do that. One, if you would only like to provide written comment that does not necessarily need to be heard or read by the counselors during the meeting, go ahead and attendees can use the chat button and written comment can be provided. If the meeting is slow enough, then the counselors may be able to read that and consider it during the meetings, but it's not necessarily guaranteed. It is provided as part of a text thread that is part of the record at the end of the meeting. The way to guarantee that what you want to say is heard by council during the meeting is to raise your hand. There is a raise your hand icon in the middle of the toolbar for all attendees. And Cindy will recognize people who have their hand raised during the public hearing and allow them to comment. There'll be a brief delay while I activate the profile's ability to speak. And then once the comment is finished, then the ability to speak will be over. And just as a reminder to everybody, please be patient. This is all new for us, so we're trying to do the best that we can. Also, while we have in many meetings past during workshops tried to watch the Facebook page as well as the Zoom comments, we are not going to be copying the Facebook comments into the Zoom chat thread. We've provided the link on the Facebook video for everybody to see and be able to participate on the Zoom platform. And that covers it.
Great, thank you very much. Does anyone, council, have any questions about how we're going to do that? Okay, moving on to agenda review. There is some discussion about whether a proposed proclamation should be added to the agenda for discussion this evening. And so if that is something council wants to do, I'd take a motion to add it to the agenda. Understand that it has to be a unanimous vote.
I would make that motion to add Order 2091 proclaiming June 19th, 2020 as Juneteenth in the town of Orono.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All right. Nancy, would.
Yes, I'm not sure about the protocol here. If we save discussion for after the vote, I'm going to vote not in favor. I believe that this is a significant proclamation, and I'd really like council to have more of a thoughtful vetting of these proclamations. And I just don't believe we have enough time we just don't have enough time for the discussion that I think should ensue about this. So it's not that I disapprove of the proclamation itself, it's just that I would like to do it at a different time.
Okay, all right. What we'll do is we'll take a vote as to whether council puts it on the agenda. If it goes on the agenda, then we'll have further discussion at the agenda. So Nancy, would you take a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Councilor Coutts?
In favor.
Councilor Osher?
Favor?
Councilor Perry?
In favor.
Councilor Maynard?
In favor.
Councilor Gardner?
In favor?
Councilor Robertson?
Not in favor.
Counselor Grenier,
In favor.
and the vote is 6 in favor, 1 opposed.
So it will not
Not
be
get
added
added
to
to
the agenda.
So
Okay,
that, just point of clarification, that also removed it from any possible discussion about it? If it's not on the agenda?
we could possibly discuss it towards the end in public comment or counselors.
Is there a way to ask Councilor Robertson to reconsider her vote, given that this has completely removed any discussion of the possibility of this?
Well, this is good because this is something that I thought about, Sam, and I think that,
I would say, Sam, that she has a right to not vote it in. It has to be unanimous, so we can.
Okay. No,
I would like to
just wanted
see it, Cindy, see it somewhere else, but I have some things that I'd like to say, but I don't want to say it tonight.
Okay.
So if there's a way to move it to a workshop or something else, that would be fine.
Juneteenth is this Friday, though, so this is a thing that's not going to be able to be addressed, and it's very important that we kind of deal with it now.
I understand. I'm not going to change my vote.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to clarify.
Okay. So we'll move on to approval of minutes of May 11th, 2020 and June 4th, 2020. I'll take a motion, please.
Move approval.
All right, and a second.
Second?
All right. Any comments, corrections, questions about the minutes? Hearing none. Nancy, would you take a vote on the approval of the minutes, please?
Counselor Coons,
In favor?
Counselor Osher,
In favor?
Counselor Perry,
In favor.
Counselor Maynard,
In favor?
Counselor Gardner,
In favor?
Counselor Robertson,
In favor?
Counselor Grenier,
In favor.
and the vote is 7 in favor, none opposed.
Okay. Moving on to public hearings. I don't have my gavel, but open public hearing A to consider a vitulers licenses for American Legion, Bell's IGA, Burger King, Dysart's Travel Stop, Ledbetter's, The Store Ampersand, Thai Kitchen, and Wendy's. So is that Dave? Bill, can we have Dave?
Dave was just promoted, so it might take him a few minutes.
There he is.
Hi there, folks. I'm Dave Mylan, the Director of Community Development. I had just gotten booted off and it brought me back on. So are we here talking about the American Legion Post application?
All vitulers licenses that are on tonight's agenda, starting with the American.
Okay, as we've done in previous months, the inspections were not able to be done in person yet. Some of the places are open, some of them are limited openings. So I will say with the American Legion Post, we have had no problems, and it was last inspected in 2019, and staff is recommending approval.
Okay.
Are we taking? Are you taking them one at a time, Madam Chair? Or?
Sure. Why don't we run it down? So the American Legion.
Correct.
Looks good. Bell's
Yes.
IGA looks good. Burger King.
Bell's IGA is good. Burger King is, we would make it a conditional approval. Go ahead, Sophie. I can see you're reaching for a speak.
So I missed this when I put the material together. I apologize, but they owe us some tax money. So we would ask that this be pulled from consent, put on new business so that you could condition it, and we provided you some language for that.
Okay. And Dysart's travel stop?
Again, staff recommends approval.
Ledbetter's? Ledbetter's is okay?
Staff is recommending approval.
Okay. The store ampersand?
Well, they're a television star, so they have to be approved with glee and delight.
Okay. Thai kitchen
Recommend approval.
and Wendy's.
Again, staff recommends approval.
Okay. So now it's open for public comment. I don't see any hands raised. Bill, you'll let me know if I miss somebody. So,
You're all good.
okay, then I will, does council have anything to say on those? Okay, then I will close public hearing A and move to public hearing B to discuss the 2020-2021 municipal capital and WPCF budgets. Thank you, Dave. Sophie, you're up.
All right, I managed to lose my presentation, so let's try this again. All right, am I here we go. There we go. Everybody can hear me? All right, I can see Cindy. That's always a good thing. So after weeks and weeks of budget workshops, I am trying to compress all that we talked about in a very small amount of time. If I go too fast, please give me a signal, Cindy, and if I am going too slow, please feel free to hurry me up. So when we start our budget conversation, I think it's really important to understand the difference between local services and municipal services, because your property tax is paying for local services. And those would include RSU 26, Penobscot County services, and Town of Orono services. So when we think about those municipal services, which are the ones we're going to talk about today, you're really talking about those that the Town of Orono provides: general government, community development, public services, public safety, public infrastructure, and stewardship of all of the buildings and facilities and lands and structures that we own. So this year, when you think about the net cost that's funded by the local property tax, you will see that the town's net tax needs have decreased by $93,000. The school has increased by $559,000, and the county has increased by $22,990 for an overall increase of almost $489,000. And a pretty pie to show you. So when somebody comes into town hall with their dollar for their property taxes, less than 36 cents of that stays with us. The rest of it we are required to account for, to collect, but then we have to distribute it to the school and the county. So it is a process where municipalities are obligated to assess the funds that the county and the school need. The county and the school each have their own budget process. The county's budget process happens every fall as they run on a calendar year, and we are required to provide payment in October of each year. That's a public process and people are welcome to participate in it. The RSU 26 process happens almost simultaneously with the towns, but they have their own public budget process. The final approval goes to public referendum, and this year that public referendum is going to happen on July 14th. So people have to go to the polls and approve the school budget. There was some confusion, I think, in the comments that we received during the budget workshop. There was a time when RSU 26 was part of the town, when the schools were part of the town. And when that happened, the town council did have final approval of the school budget. But when they created their own regional school unit, the town council lost that control over the school budget and it went to the voters directly. So most years I start my, I give a backwards budget presentation where I talk about expenses first and then I go into revenues. That's backwards because you should always be thinking about what you're going to collect in revenues and then build your expense budget based on that. This year, revenues really drove the expense budget, and as we go through it, you'll be able to understand why. So we have a little disclaimer on this budget, and that is that a lot of our revenues are very sensitive to the economy. When the economy is up, we get more revenues. When the economy goes down, we get less of the property tax revenues. When I started my budget process back in the late winter, early spring, we were expecting a much different economic picture than we are today. So town council expects that they will end up revisiting the municipal budget later this summer after there are more accurate forecasts available to the town. We've made our best estimates based on the information that we do have, but it is likely that more information will come in before we have to commit taxes. So when we think about municipal revenue projections, you'll see that we're actually asking for about $93,000 in less in local property taxes. We're looking at a decrease of about $265,000 in revenue sharing. We're going to talk quite a bit about revenue sharing, so I'm going to skip along to the general fund revenues, which there are elements in there that are very sensitive to the economic climate. Our capital revenues are up, which means we're just using some alternative funding sources for capital improvements. We're expecting more money in homestead reimbursement, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later in the presentation. And you'll see we have increased our assigned fund balance. So overall, we're looking to bring in approximately $233,000 less this year than we brought in last year, than we projected to bring in last year. So if we look at non-property tax revenue, you will see that the bulk of our revenue comes in through general fund revenues, then revenue sharing. Our restricted funds are the funds, quite honestly, that we use to pay for economic development. Those are our tax increment financing funds. We're using some unassigned fund balance, and our homestead reimbursement is going to go up this year, which we're going to talk about. I thought it would be very interesting to pull the UMaine contribution out of general fund revenues where it usually lives so that people can see that we do get almost 11% of our funding directly from a contribution from the University of Maine. So let's talk about state municipal revenue sharing because it is a major factor in our budget this year. revenue sharing, for those who are not aware, all municipalities in the state of Maine share a portion of the various taxes collected by the state: individual income tax, corporate income tax, franchise tax on financial institutions, service provider taxes, and sales and use taxes. So we were actually getting gains because the state statute has prescribed a level of funding at 5% of that pool of money for a very long time. And over the last many years, there have been raids on municipal revenue sharing that dropped that percentage all the way down to 2%. And this year, we went from 2% to 3%. There is a statutory increase from 3% to 3.75% planned for this year. So we had expected to bring in almost $500,000 more in revenue sharing when we originally built the budget. So the COVID-19 has really impacted our economy. I think everybody sees that. The income and use taxes are very sensitive to economic shifts. So the state put out in April a caution to municipalities not to use the forecast numbers that they had provided us with in March. The State Revenue Forecasting Committee is scheduled to reconvene in July, late July, early August, to forecast state revenues. That will provide us some better insight into revenue sharing program distributions. So we've been talking about pie a lot here at Town Hall, and what we've decided is a bigger piece of a smaller pie still means less pie. So we had thought we were going to get a little over $2 million. My best projection right now has us landing just shy of 1.25 million. So that's a considerable swing. It's over $750,000 that we were planning to get that we're now saying we probably won't get. This revenue sharing chart garnered quite a bit of conversation during the budget workshops because it shows, if you look in 2008, we were well above 1.5 million. And then over time, you can see the economic dips and recovery. And then in 2014, they started the raids on revenue sharing in earnest. And you can see how much it declined. And then in 2020, where they increased it a whole percent, it went up significantly. And you can see that we were projecting more for FY21. And the yellow indicates where we think we're going to be. So that's a kind of a telling chart when people ask why we've cut certain services or why the tax rate is high. So this year, along with the revenue sharing, we also are going to experience a change in the homestead exemption. So homestead exemption is a tax break for qualifying homesteaders. To be a homesteader, you have to live in a home that you own, and you have to have lived there for a year after April 1st of any given year. They are increasing that. So the homestead exemption decreases your taxable value. So the amount that the tax rate is applied to get to your property tax bill. So in FY21, that is increasing from $20,000 to $25,000. So people would see, just based on that $5,000 at the projected tax rate, your tax bill is going to be $140.45 less than it otherwise would have been. We are projecting an increase in taxes, but this should shield homesteaders from $140 of that increase. When you look at the revenues, it looks like we're gaining $133,000 of revenue, which we are, but that gain is offset by a loss in taxable value. So it holds the mill rate steady. Making sense? People can interrupt. Okay. So the other place that we're expecting losses of about $144,000 total, we're expecting to lose $20,600 in road subsidy, which comes directly from the state of Maine. We're expecting to lose about $28,000 in fees for service. That is being fairly optimistic that our ambulance calls are going to rebound, because we were actually on pace to be ahead of normal calls, and we are now actually a little bit behind because people just don't want to go to the hospital in the middle of a pandemic. And the economy has really caused some problems with our investment earnings. So we have some money in just in the bank. We had been earning 1.9% interest, and that has dropped to 0.4%. So you'll see that we expect for municipal services to bring in about $4.5 million in property tax and about $5.9 million in other revenue sources. Both of those are down, so a total reduction of about $233,000. Questions on revenue? Good? Okay. Expenses. So when the revenue declines, it means that the expenses need to adjust, or the tax rate will go up more. So we made many cuts in this budget, and my thought is, as we go through each department, I will share with you the general cuts that were made. Our operating expenses after all the cuts are actually up 0.3% or $27,000. Our debt service is up about $7,000 or 0.9%. Economic development is down $12,000, and I held our overlay estimate at what it was last year, which brings us to a total increase on operating expenses of $21,000 or 0.23%. Capital budget is down $255,000 or 21.29%, which gives us a total decrease in municipal expenditures of $233,262. So when we think about the budget, there are different cost centers, and instead of going line by line through each department, which is what we did during the budget workshop, where we detailed how many people had, what their goals were, what kind of services they provided, what kind of equipment they had to provide those services. My thought is I would hold it at a higher level and just run through this fairly quickly for you. So we're seeing an increase of approximately $23,000 in our general government cost center. That is coming from a change in health insurance selection for some employees and some raises that were promised as part of a hire process. So in general, this budget does not include any cost of living increases. There are some employees that were already on professional development plans that included raises with certain benchmarks, and many of those employees are still on track with those plans. When we look at the town clerk's office, the town clerk had asked for a part-time assistant to help, especially with elections. The town clerk's office handles all of the non-election day costs within that budget. And we did not have the money to fund that position, but recognize the workload in that department is very heavy. And so are instead going to modify the working hours so that we will not be open to the public on Fridays and staff will be working on projects. Any other questions about general government? Anything counselors think I've missed? No? Okay.
Nope.
So community development are the assessing, planning, code enforcement, and economic development. That has decreased $22,000 or 2%. The bulk of those funds are economic development, which are not funded from the general fund, but rather through tax increment financing program development funds. So they're very restricted on what we can use those for. Assessing supports 1 full-time assessor and 8 hours of clerical time a week. And right now they are, our assessor, Mike Noble, is working on reval. We talked at length about that during the budget workshop. Our planning is supported by 1 town planner. Code enforcement is supported by 1 code enforcement officer. Planning, code, and economic development share a administrative assistant for 32 hours a week. When we talked about code enforcement, $12,000 of their budget is attributed to new software. We had kind of a lengthy discussion on what that software would be able to do for us and why it is so important for that office. But it will allow us to have better documentation of the things that we do. Questions about community development? Okay. So economic development, you'll see, is funded primarily through the downtown and transit-oriented TIF district. Webster Point, Penobscot Dermatology, Dirigo Pines Inn, and Orono Basin are primarily funding credit enhancement agreements. Penobscot Dermatology includes approximately $20,000 of economic development general expense. The downtown transit-oriented TIF district is also funding the Black Bear Express, the shuttle, and funding the debt for the Katahdin redevelopment where UCU is, along with the Pine Street parking lot rehabilitation. So public safety had the largest increase of any cost center this year. And the reason for that is when we did our 3-year review during the collective bargaining negotiation process, we were able to identify that we were very short, very low in terms of wages for staff. So both of those collective bargaining agreements include 3-year plans to bring our employees up a little bit in terms of wages. The Public Safety Administration line has increased because we have shifted an employee that used to work in community development 50% of the time and public safety 50% of the time. We've shifted that person 100% of the time to public safety, primarily to support the life safety program, our fire marshals program. The hazmat budget is included on this sheet and in the total. However, it is funded by its own revenue source. So that is an enterprise fund of sorts. We get funding from the University of Maine and the Penobscot County to fund that team. And fire protection is under public safety, but that is an assessment that we receive as directed by the Public Utilities Commission from the Orono VZ Water District. So we don't have any control over that. Any questions? Good. Okay. Cindy, I can pretty much only see you and Tom, so going based on you. Public Works has an operating budget of, oh, whoops, let me go back to public safety. When we look at public safety, there were some cuts to those budgets that will have to be considered as we come back next year. One of them is a cut of one of the 2 cruisers that were scheduled to be replaced. So last year we replaced 1. We were scheduled to replace 2. We replaced 1. This year we were scheduled to replace 2 and we replaced 1. Next year we're going to have to see how that looks and likely replace 2, which would be about $45,000. And police department also cut a police intern position, which is about $5,600. Fire department moved the planned replacement of the fire chief's vehicle forward 1 year to FY22. So I think we had a lot of discussion around public works. The total public works department budget is down about $70,000 or 4%. When you look at the listing of departments, you see that general maintenance is $974,000. And the reason that is so high is because, or low, depending on how you look at it, is because all of our staff that, except for the mechanic, are attributed only to general maintenance. That is a shift that we made last year, and we're continuing with that. We, the Public Works and WPCF shared a laborer, and Joe had the laborer in the spring at WPCF to help flush the system and do maintenance on the collection system. Rob had that individual through the winter so that he could have some assistance primarily with the sidewalk machine. As part of this budget process, the council elected to leave that position vacant, which means when we get to the winter, there is going to be a decrease in service level in terms of responding to winter storms. The way the crew is set up, they're set up on 2 shifts that work opposite each other with 8 hours of overlap during the day. They, when they're responding to a winter storm, that shared position did not fall on a crew and instead was treated like a dedicated sidewalk maintenance person. So when the crew was when the storm was starting to wind down, the sidewalk machine could get out and attack the snow pretty soon after the end of the storm. The way we have it set up now without that person, the sidewalk machine is going to be staffed by someone who would normally be on the crew. So you're gonna have to wait until the roads and the parking lots are cleared before we'll be able to get somebody out onto the street. Rob was predicting that that's probably gonna be a 2 to 4 hour delay. Winter maintenance cuts along with that person included a cut to the winter sand budget of 50%. Rob thinking that he can use some of the sand that has been stockpiled and then evaluate at the end of the year. Fleet maintenance is also the town garage. And that is up about $3,500. And a lot of that has to do with just some HVAC work and other maintenance that you need in a building that is getting, well, it's starting to age. Solid waste, we had significant conversation around solid waste. The cost associated with managing our closed landfill has increased for testing and engineering work. And that's it. Ready to go on? Or did anybody want to say more about? No? Okay. So the library, in FY 21, the library actually has an increase of $1,040 or 0.3%. Even with looking at that increase, which is minor, the library is having to really kind of relearn how to provide services in this new normal of a pandemic. And their budget reflects a lot of unknown. We decided to, at this point, leave the 20-hour children's services clerk position vacant through FY21. There's, in the budget workshops, we spent a lot of time talking about the library and Lori's plan to very slowly bring services to the public beyond what we're able to do right now. She's already implemented curbside collection. You can see her tent in the picture where she has a table. My understanding is that the locker system that she purchased is here and getting retrofitted and should be put up fairly soon. Questions about the library? Parks and Recreation has a decrease of $44,615 or 25%. So there are a couple things with the Parks and Rec budget. The first is the town council's decision not to open the municipal pool this year. Staff was having a very hard time trying to figure out how we could open the pool given the guidance that we had received from the CDC. So this $17,000 that we've budgeted is actually, some of it has to do with closing the pool for this year, and the rest of it has to do with opening the pool at the beginning of next season, which is actually the end of the fiscal year. Parks and Recreation is a department that we're actually adding an individual to. You'll notice the decrease in the budget, but we share the Parks and Rec director's time with community development as the deputy community development director. So we've shifted more of his time so that he can support Dave Mylan and all of his work in economic development. And we've brought Megan Mazzilla back on as our new rec coordinator. Our hope is that that will allow us to expand some of our offerings. The budget has been cut, so we won't have a ton of resources to see major shifts in the department. However, we're looking at doing things like providing some summer programming for youth, especially since the pool is closed. Megan is going to be working to increase our programming and working with providers to hopefully kind of begin to fill out this framework that we've built around Parks and Recreation. I can tell you that I'm excited. When we get to the end of this meeting, I'll be able to share an update around some of the work that we've done with Parks and Rec already. She's been with us for a week.
A question?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. For this slide, it mentions that some of the funding in here for municipal pool is going towards the beginning of next season, which is in this fiscal year that we're talking about.
Yes.
So do we have any money left from last fiscal year that was designated for opening the pool this year, which is not happening.
Some of that, Sam, to work through the pool, if that makes any sense. We're not opening it, but there's still some maintenance that we need to do. And we're also capturing some funds from what's left this year to offset our revenue losses. We're working with the university right now to try to identify the equipment and other things that we'll need for some of our rec programming that we have planned for this summer. And if we have money left in the municipal pool line and we end the year in the black, my plan would be to ask council to carry forward some of that money to help us with our summer programming.
Okay, thank you. I was just curious, looking at the formula, wanted to see that other part of the equation.
Good? Okay. When we look at facilities, you'll see that the town has some pretty major facilities, and we spend about $360,000 a year to maintain those facilities. As we talked about in the budget process, there's work that needs to be done to these facilities, and the budget in front of you simply manages the heat, the real basics for these buildings. The general facilities budget includes the funding for our 3 facilities people, and the life safety systems cost center is new. We've had some issues with sprinkler systems and fire alarm panels. This was a way to pull that out so that we can more clearly identify the maintenance and costs associated with maintaining those mandatory safety systems. Questions about facilities? The cuts in facilities were to cut out contract cleaning. Debt and other, this is down about $18,850. Our debt service is actually up just a little bit because we brought on the streetlight expense. We are down significantly in other. Most of that is attributable to a one-time savings of about $25,000 for our community connector assessment. The community connector received CARE Act funding to backfill costs associated with the COVID-19 health emergency. The city of Bangor, who we contract with for the community connector service, will be applying that savings to the FY21 assessment. So that will be a one-time, about $25,000 savings. Any questions about the expense or revenue budget?
I don't see anyone.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead to capital investment. So just real quickly, the difference between capital and operations is that a capital expense has to be over $5,000 and last for at least 5 years. The types of capital investments that we look at here are infrastructure, roads, public infrastructure, equipment, and facilities. So for FY21 capital investments, we are projecting a total expense of $972,000, with $650,000 of that funded by general fund taxes, so the property tax, and $351,500 by non-tax revenue or funds. I just want to clarify that when we say $650,000 of general fund or property taxes, we mean this year. There are some reserve funds that are part of the $351,000 that would likely have been originally tax dollars. For capital equipment, we are looking at spending $8,000 for fire hose. So fire hose has a life expectancy, and they test it every year. And what they have discovered is that it is time to replace a significant amount of our fire hose. $9,000 for SCBA bottles. All of that would be funded through hazmat reserve this year. Spending $52,200 on a police cruiser, $10,000 on police technology, $6,400 on taser replacement, $185,000 on a new wheeler, and $15,000 on truck body and sander for the medium duty truck. This would be the truck that we purchased used from the University of Maine several years ago. The thought being that we can put a new body and sander on that, and when we buy a new truck, just move the body over. So it should save us some money in the future, and we should get some more life out of this truck. Any questions about capital equipment?
And Sophie, I believe the police cruiser includes all of the accoutrements with it.
Yep, that's a total budget. Okay. So capital infrastructure, this has changed since our budget workshop. We're still looking at $100,000 for Main Street sidewalks. This would be funded by the downtown and transit-oriented TIF district. We'd like to pave a portion of Forest Ave from Noyes Drive to the end of the urban compact, which will cost about $125,000. About $170,000 or 32.5% for phase 2 of the North Main Avenue project. That project is actually slated to be constructed in FY22. We delayed that for budget reasons. $95,000 to pave Godfrey Drive with a little curb and sidewalk repair. That's funded by the EnvisionNet TIF. $25,000 to continue the excellent work that the Public Works Department has been doing on College Avenue sidewalk paving, and $95,000 for the miscellaneous accounts. And those miscellaneous accounts, there are several of them, and they are where Rob is able to fund many of his smaller projects, and also the things that come up that we haven't identified. As you can imagine, we don't necessarily know every single public works project that's going to need to happen for the next 12 months. But those would be miscellaneous road improvements for $30,000, stormwater system improvements for $20,000, electrical and lighting improvements for $25,000, curb improvements for $5,000, and sidewalk improvements for $15,000. Capital facilities are scheduled to be $46,500 of expenses in the coming year. For $7,500 will be spent out of the Public Works Facility Reserve to seal the exterior block at the Public Works facility. That's something that needs to happen on a fairly regular basis to ensure that we are maintaining the exterior of that building. $15,000 to paint the town office exterior. This project was actually funded a year ago, but we had a sprinkler system fail a test at the public safety building, which required us to reallocate those funds. So we are at a point right now where we really need to get some paint on the trim and boards on Town Hall before we begin to have more damage done. Looking at town office carpet replacement on the second floor of Town Hall for $14,000. If you would recall, it's been a long time since counselors or the public have been in council chambers or walking up to council chambers, but that rug is pulled in places. It's glued, so it can't be stretched. And it is, there are lots of tripping hazards all along that floor. So we need to fix that. And we have $10,000 public safety communication cable project, which we would fund from the IT reserve. We are undertaking later on in this budget, you will approve a similar cable project for town hall, where we just had cables that did not support our IT infrastructure, and that is becoming even more important as we try to operate remotely and with new equipment. Capital reserve funding. We are not putting aside any money this year for next year. So what that means is we are going to use $100,000 of capital equipment reserve, and we are not going to replace it. We were scheduled to put $75,000 into ambulance reserve. We are not going to do that, and instead we're pushing out an ambulance replacement by 1 year. We are not 100% sure that we'll be able to do that, but we're going to try. Public safety radios that we know we're going to have to replace to be compliant with the new county system and federal regulations. We had been putting money aside, started to put money aside for that. We're not going to this year. Building reserves, if we have a building maintenance issue, we don't have a lot of money in that reserve account. We had been putting $10,000 a year for major maintenance, $5,000 for the library, and $5,000 for public works. We're not doing that this year. And landfill reserve, this is the money that we use when we have to close an open landfill and open a new one. And last number I saw estimate was over $500,000 that we would need to be able to do that. So we've been putting $15,000 a year aside. We are not going to do that this year. That saved us $247,000 in the budget. Any questions about capital? So we talked about the county, the school, and the town, and how the town is responsible for 35.7% of the total tax bill. When we look at the projected tax rate, the budget that is in front of council that we are presenting tonight has 0 increase in the municipal tax rate for the municipal side, 8 cents for the county, and $1.56 for the school. That would bring the tax rate to $28.09 per $1,000 of value, or $1.64 more than what people paid last year. So what's impacting that tax rate? You know, there's been a lot of discussion about Orono has high taxes, so we should have more services, or Orono has high taxes and we need to really examine that. You know, what we talked about for quite a bit during these budget workshops was the fact that Orono has almost 50% of its value as not taxable, which means that we have 100% of the costs that you would associate with a community of our size. I would say less than 100% of the cost, because we compare nicely on the expense side to communities of 7,000 or 8,000 people. And we have almost 11,000 people. But because we don't have the value in order to provide those services that people expect, the mill rate has to go up for that. So when we look at what's impacting the mill rate this year, so it's already high because we have so little taxable value. We know that when you increase expenses, so these are the bills we've got to send to the school and the county, by $582,000, that's going to impact the tax rate. We have a projected loss of value of about $9.3 million. 4.5 is real value loss, so that's real value that we had on the books last year that is not going to be on the books this year. And we're estimating the homestead value loss at almost $4.9 million. So remember, we're getting some revenue in to help offset that, but that value loss is going to be important for us to keep in mind. So before I go to the end, this is where I talk about the fact that there are lots of unknowns in this budget, and I think the community had a lot of great ideas as we went through the budget process. Council certainly did an awful lot of thinking and planning in this budget. But at the end of the day, we're going to have to make our best projection with revenue coming in. And right now it's really hard to see that because the economy, we just don't have numbers yet. So the plan will be to come back and review what we do know before we would get set to commit taxes. And in doing that, we might restore some things that we cut. We might end up having to look further in the budget if the numbers don't come in as optimistic as I have projected. So I think it would be really important for the public to be spending some effort to kind of keep in touch with what's happening at Town Hall. We have the agenda service so people can sign up to get notice of meetings, and I think they'll want to pay attention as we move forward. Normally, by the time we get to this point in the budget, we're pretty firm on what's going to happen. And most of the time, the number for the mill rate that I publish at the budget presentation, public hearing, is we usually are able to come in a cent or two under that. I don't know where we're going to be this year because I still think that there's a lot of uncertainty on the revenue side. And I would open it up for questions on that piece. I've got the WPCF budget to quickly go through, but I thought we could do them separately. So any comments, concerns, questions?
Go ahead, Cindy.
No, I was just going to say I don't see anybody's hands raised, so you can go with
I don't have any questions, Sophie. I have some comments, and I think that this was a really good process that we went through this year. I think it was pretty thorough. Everybody had a chance to weigh in. Every staff had a chance to weigh in, and even helped us along when we had some. I know for me, when I was sitting on the fence. It was nice that Rob had checked in with us, and I really feel like we did I feel like more than ever, and maybe it's because it's my third budget process, but I feel like more than ever it was a very thorough look at what we have and what we don't have, and what we can do and how we can keep the public safe, and also how we don't we were really concerned about not cutting jobs. That was one of our priorities. So thank you. I appreciate that process.
anyone else? Belle, I don't see anyone raising a hand.
I don't either.
Okay. So Sophie, you can move on.
Okay, so I have to share a different presentation. So give me just a minute. All right. So I can't see. Am I shared right now?
No.
All right. Give me just a second. All right. All right, that looks like I'm shared now.
Yep.
So you will notice that I am not as creative with WPCF. This should look very familiar to you. So WPCF, or Water Pollution Control Facility, for some would understand this as a sewer system, sanitary sewer system. It's actually broken into several sections. There is a collection system, which includes 23 miles of collection infrastructure, 500 manholes, and 4 pump stations. Wastewater treatment includes headworks that's permitted to treat 1.84 million gallons of influent a day. It's a secondary activated sludge plant. We use ultraviolet light for disinfection, and we dispose of sludge. So we dewater and then dispose of the sludge. We also have a combined sewer overflow. So we have a pipe that goes to the river so that it overflows and protects our infrastructure. Each one of these 3 areas creates a whole bevy of regulations that we're required to follow. So this year, we're looking at WPCF expense budget of $1.6 million. It's actually down almost $23,500 from last year. The expense budget is down not because it requires less money, but because we have less revenue coming in. WPCF does not fund, is not funded by general fund taxes. It operates based on the sewer billings that it collects for use of the system. If you look at the WPCF budget, you will see that we have $440,000, or 27% of the budget, funds personnel. So we have 3 lead operators and 2 secondary operators. Those operators work for Joe, who is the superintendent, and we actually run on Joe's license for operations. We talked quite a bit during the budget process about the fact that we're doing some succession planning and hoping that we can bring somebody along with licensure adequate to run the plant when Joe retires, which we hope will not be for years and years to come. And I can say that because he doesn't have a voice right now. He's still just watching. $580,000 is just paying debt. That's 36% of this budget pays for debt retirement. $215,000, or 13% of the budget, funds electricity and sludge tipping fees. 9% of the budget, or almost $139,000, is a payment, a direct transfer that goes from WPCF to the town general fund budget to offset the costs associated with services that town staff provides. So we don't share staff. We instead provide it more like a contract to WPCF. All town employees, but you have to be careful with how you delineate them. And 15% of this budget funds everything else, so $231,000. So when you start thinking about how we might be able to cut expenses, given our revenue issues, you have to keep in mind that 63% of this budget is funding fixed costs. So we are expecting a small increase in billings, but not to the degree that we were expecting when we approved the rate increase last year. And the reason for that is we are seeing declining consumption. So sewer fees are billed based on water consumption. When water consumption goes down, our revenue also goes down. We are also expecting a significant cut in our projected earnings on investments, and that's just due to the economic downturn, but that's almost $30,000 just gone. And then we have $4,700 that we project for miscellaneous revenue. For FY21, our capital equipment, we're planning to change out a grit trailer at $5,100. We're planning to replace a coil in the Headworks heat exchanger at $5,300. We are planning some capital infrastructure projects. We scaled these way back, and Joe was essentially trying to stay ahead of Rob, the Public Works capital plan, because sewer needs to go in first and make the repairs to the system. So North Main Avenue manhole replacements need to be done this year to be ready for next year's construction. Westwood Drive, we need to start engineering that main replacement to get ready for the Westwood Drive project. Joe has, every year we set aside miscellaneous sewer improvements of $20,000, and that's really worked well. Instead of coming back to council for approval for a $4,000 fix here or a $5,000 fix someplace else, having that pool of money at his disposal has certainly helped us. And then our big project this year is the Mill Street Sanitary Sewer Separation Project. So we have a catch basin that is connected to the sanitary sewer system. So it is allowing stormwater to flow into our sanitary sewer system, which it is a contributor to CSOs. We won't know to what degree until we pull it off and hopefully see an incredible improvement. That project is being funded out of the downtown and transit-oriented TIF district. So we have some concerns on the horizon for WPCF. The first is that trending decline in consumption. You know, Joe and I went out and looked at the sewer rate study. They haven't changed rates in the last year. Town of Orono still enjoys the lowest sewer rate structure of anyone in our general comparables pool. We are very concerned about that decline in consumption because the costs of running the system are not declining. They are actually going up. We also know that capital needs continue, and we are eating the reserves, and we're not raising enough in rates to fund the reserve accounts. So when we look at the 5-year capital plan, instead of being able to fund all of the capital projects from reserve, you will see in the outlying years on that plan, we're starting to have to fund them through the rates, which would really drive rates if we ended up having to do that. So much like the capital discussion that we had on the town side, we really need in the fall to have a discussion about long-term planning and what the budget is going to be able to support moving forward. So at this point, we are not contemplating a rate increase. Talking with the water district, I think we're going to see a sharp decline in consumption in the first quarter of our fiscal year. So I think we just need to be prepared for that. And what we talked about during the workshop is that instead of trying to project an unknown, it made a lot more sense for us to kind of stay where we are for right now and pause, much like we're doing with the town budget, and then have some conversations as we get into the fall and into the winter about what is on the horizon for WPCF and the town. That is what I have for WPCF. Any
All right.
questions?
Questions or comments? I'm seeing none, hearing none. So thank you very much, Sophie, for all of those. I was a little worried about some of the muffins that were on the desk, but that was a very interesting presentation. We will close public hearing B and move on to public hearing C to accept comments on the proposed FY 2021 fee schedule. And I don't know if you get to do this too, or you got someone batting for you instead.
So I did not do a PowerPoint because, quite frankly, I was PowerPointed out. But every year, the town council adopts a fee schedule, and that is a schedule that staff uses to assess fees and collect funds. When we look at this year's fee schedule changes, there are a couple of changes in the fire department fees. The ambulance fee for if we don't transport someone. So this would include lift assists and fall responses at skilled care and staff residential facilities. That is, it was $195 an hour with a 1 hour minimum. We're going to move that to we're proposing to move it to $225 an hour at a 1 hour minimum. This makes it the same as what we charge the town of VZ per ambulance call. So there's a general sense of symmetry there. A lift assist after what we are proposing is after 3 calls within a year, which would be a fiscal year. If we're called to a lift assist that does not have medical or transport needs, the chief will review it and potentially charge somebody $150 for that call. With that lift assist, that used to just be a generic $100 call for a lift assist that we didn't charge out. So what we're saying now is if you do it more than 3 times and there isn't a medical or transport need, we would bill $150. There are some minor changes in the Parks and Rec. We are looking to delete Adult League Softball because we haven't done that for several years. We are looking to increase the summer and vacation camps from $140 a week to $150 a week, or from $38 a day to $50 a day.
Are those driven by us, Sophie, or by the university?
My understanding is those are based on conversations between both of us, because part of the agreement that we had when we combined our 2 camps into 1 camp was that we would be able to maintain relatively affordable program costs, whereas I think you'll find those costs are still less than what Rad Camp without the town's participation was prior to our joining forces.
Okay, thanks.
So that would, So the other piece that I will tell you we're going to want to put on the fee schedule, but we are still talking internally, and that is the idea of permit parking out at Gould's. Our thought is that residents would not pay for that. And at this point for this year, our plan, given the space constraint and the need for space because of the pandemic, our thought is to not open that up to non-residents beyond the Gould's Landing identified parking. So, but that will have to come if we open up to non-residents. We'll have to think about a fee for non-residents.
Does anybody have any questions or comments on that? I'm not seeing or hearing anything. So I will close the public hearing up C and move on to public hearing D to review the Orono Village Center District Development Program.
Mylan, I'm gonna guess that was my responsibility.
Sure.
Oh,
The only thing I would like to highlight for the council in this report, this is an order that that the council votes on each year for the special district for the Village Center District. I just wanted to highlight that in your on the agenda, it shows, you'll see some numbers highlighted. The significance of those are that they're new this year. The district that you look at each year predominantly includes all of the village commercial district and then some other small areas. Those highlighted areas are new lots that were included into the village commercial district this year by ordinance. That had, as you may remember, the Alpenglow, those a few lots along Main Street. So if you're wondering why some of those are highlighted and some not, it's because it's the first year they've been included in this list.
so I just shared my screen to show everyone the boundaries of the village district. Just want to clarify for folks that this is a development district. It was formed to pay special attention to the activity that was going to happen in the village, but also it comes with taxing authority. For many, many years, residents were taxed an additional fee that they had to pay. We, several years ago, decided that we were able to fund a lot of the programs that would have been funded out of with the development district tax through the downtown and transit oriented TIF district, and it just didn't seem reasonable to continue to tax people more for living in this district. So council made a decision to not assess taxes. The costs associated with putting a development district together is substantial. And we received guidance that although the council might be happy to not assess taxes anymore, that we really needed to go through the process of maintaining the district on paper. So every year we ask you to look at the district and approve the boundaries and look at a development plan, and the development plan for the district mirrors the development plan for the downtown and transit oriented TIF district. And then we ask you to consider assessing a tax of $0 per thousand. And we're doing that again this year. So this is more of an exercise to protect the town's future right, as opposed to having any impact in this current year.
Okay, does anyone have any comments or questions on that? I see no one raising their hand. So, so we just went over the development program or the development area. So now I'll close public hearing D and moved on to public hearing E, which is the implementation assessments to be assessed against real and personal property for the municipal development district located in the downtown area known as the Village Center Tax District. The maximum rate of assessments to be expended in any 1 year, 50 cents per $1,000 of assessed value as of April 1, 2021. The assessment proposed to be levied for a 1-year program commencing on July 1, 2021 and ending on June 30, 2021. Numbers are wrong. July 1,
Yeah,
2020.
2020. Well, I'll correct that. Thanks.
Okay, is $0 per $1,000 of assessed value.
The presentation hasn't changed at all from what I said just a few minutes ago. If you'd like to talk more, I'm happy to, but I also know it's been a long meeting.
Okay. And basically what we're saying is there's no tax that will be charged. All right, if there's no questions, comments, I will close public hearing E, move on to public hearing F, a 6-month moratorium ordinance on commercial solar projects to regulate solar farms.
I believe, Sophie, you want me to take this and give your voice a little bit of a rest. And you can be queuing up my the next one we'll have to do. So the council and the public, you may remember that at previous meetings, I had asked you to consider a moratorium on commercial solar projects in town. This is, I need to emphasize this is not an act to prohibit them, but simply last year some legislative action had taken place that further encouraged development of solar farms and on a larger scale production of electricity. And unfortunately, our ordinances do not have anything currently in them to allow the planning board to review them. And so what we need is a little bit of time to be able to come back with an ordinance for you to consider on commercial solar, so that in essence we'll have the rules to be reviewed then by Kyle Drexler, the town planner, and I both feel that we could come back to a committee meeting relatively quickly with proposed language for an ordinance. And so though we certainly are asking you to consider such a moratorium, we think that it will be a relatively short period of time to allow us to create the rules. And certainly willing to answer any questions anyone might have.
So Dave, we're voting on this next month though.
Correct. As I said, this is for the public hearing.
Yep.
For the moratorium that's required. So as I said, if there were anyone who might have questions about it, then we're prepared to try and answer them.
Okay. I don't see anybody raising their hand, but if there's a specific question someone has, can they email it to you?
Absolutely. They can either send it to info@orono.org or right directly to me at dmilan, DMILAN @orono.org.
Great. Thank you very much. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? All right, hearing none. I thank you, Dave. I will close public hearing F. Move on to public hearing G to consider a First Amendment to the Envision Net Municipal Development and Tax Increment Financing District Development Program. It says Dave Milan is the presenter.
So this is going to be a little bit of a tag team.
Well, Dave, I'm having some problem because your presentation is splitting in my screen. It looks weird. So let me show you. You show me what it looks like. I'll show you what it looks like. Well, let me try this. This didn't do this last time. Maybe it's fine. Oh, I don't want to take a tour. There we go.
So Sophie asked if I would give a brief overview of the EnvisionNet TIF for folks. It's been almost 20 years since this was created, and so we're going to try and do this together. So you can go ahead with the next one, please, Sophie. The EnvisionNet TIF was a 20-year TIF that was created in 2000 to attract a large call center business that was going to employ 1,000 people and create a 50,000 square foot building. It was a TIF district that was actually a combination, you can see in the map attached, of 5 different areas, all the way from the Godfrey Drive, where the majority of the investment was being captured, all around town to the bridge near Ayers Island, the North Main Street, College Avenue area, as well as Kelly Road, and some of Benneck Road. 100% of the new value was being captured at 3 Godfrey Drive. The 5 districts were a total of 26.57 acres. TIFs can be created to do basically one of 2 things. One is to pay back bonds that were created as part of an investment project, or through credit enhancement agreements. Though in this particular case, the credit enhancement agreement, though it was proposed in the TIF, it was never actually used because of a closure of the business. Next. The majority of the investment was happening, the captured value was at the 3 Godfrey Drive facility of what we know as the Next Links building now. It's a 14.23 acre site. It was a 50,000 square foot building that was built by the Orono Economic Development Corporation and leased to EnvisionNet with 500 parking spaces. So it's a pretty massive property. In the agreement for this, 70% of the tax revenues coming in from this new project would go to EnvisionNet to repay the debt on the bond. They're basically paying that back to Orono Economic Development Corporation. 30% of the funds that were raised from those taxations would go to those infrastructure improvements that happened all along those 5 different areas. After year 15 in the 20-year TIF, those numbers would split to 50% going to EnvisionNet to repay them for equipment costs that they had to incur in the millions of dollars when they opened, and 50% would go to the town for infrastructure improvements. Next, please. And unfortunately, with this particular project, it took a couple of years for this project to come to fruition. A lot of hard work and dedication by a large number of people to create this and adopted it in 2000. Unfortunately, EnvisionNet lost their major contract with Microsoft, who wanted to ship their customer service offshore, and it required EnvisionNet to file for bankruptcy less than a year after they opened in 2001. Microdyne took over that space at a much reduced cost, and they were doing it at a much smaller scale. So you can imagine a building that was designed for 1,000 employees that were operating 275. There was no problem with social distancing at that time. Unfortunately, the negotiated lease with Microdyne didn't cover the debt service and just the debt service alone. So much of all of the revenues that were coming out of this were didn't even cover the debt service, and the town had to pick up the balance. I'm sure some of you on the council are well aware of those years. Microdyne closed in 2011 and sold out to Nextlinks. Nextlinks closed out in 2017. Next, please. Thank you. The building was sold from the Orono Economic Development Corporation to a private developer in 2015. From the sale, those funds there were funds set aside to pay for the debt service for the bond, as it was not their type of a municipal bond that doesn't allow you to pay it off early. So we've had to have that money sitting in the bank, ready to pay that each year. The TIF revenues that have been used, that have been created, have been used to support economic development and the public infrastructure. Again, some of the North Main Street, the changes that you've seen recently, some of the things that we've talked about tonight have been are planned for revenues from this TIF as well. The building has been vacant since Nextlinks left in 2017, resulting in the fact that the assessor has actually had to reduce the value. So therefore, the tax assessment has coming in a lot less anyway. The developer has been very good to work with, but to sit there and pay $60,000 a year on a building that he hasn't been able to fill in 3 years has been a struggle. The biggest challenge with this is all of the things that have happened with this particular TIF district is it really didn't provide any of the results that were desired in the original plan for the first 15 of the past 20 years. So it's only been the last 5 years that we've actually been able to do much with with this. TIFs in the state of Maine are allowed to be created for 30 years, and this particular TIF was agreed to on a 20-year TIF. So we have the ability to be able to ask for to be expanded the remaining 10 years, which is what we're hoping that you'll consider. Next, please. The proposal is to extend the TIF for the additional 10 years to 2030. The development plan that is created for any TIF area we're asking it to be amended to include additional uses that, quite frankly, they were not allowed. These were not identified as allowable uses in 2000 when the original TIF was created, and that is uses for child care and adult care services, a revolving loan fund, or investment fund or grant program. We've talked about those in the past, as well as recreational trails. Again, whether those are used in that area or not, we wanted to be able to include them in for the remaining 10 years, simply to give you options if you so choose to use them. And I would be happy to answer any questions that you or the public might have.
Dave, is the building able to be like subdivided, or does one person have to come in and rent the whole thing? Can you rent like just a little bit of space to multiple or leases?
Sure. It's a 50,000 square foot building, a little over 50,000, but almost 52,000 square foot building with about 26,000 square feet on each floor. I've been working with two different developers before COVID-19 that were really wanting to get a project there. But when COVID opened up, it's just been a real struggle. So we've been trying to keep them kind of lukewarm until this kind of gets over with and see whether they come back to life or not. But the answer to your question is, we knew that if we couldn't find one user for the entire building, we, meaning the property owner and myself, we talked about on a weekly basis, that if we couldn't find one user for the entire building, that we could easily break it up into anywhere from 2 to 4 units to be able to make it more manageable. But I think that we're going to be able to find someone to do that. I'll use this as an example of economic development too. Is I worked with one company for a year and a half that was going to buy the building, and it was going to be redeveloped for one use into a research and development use. And then at the 11th and a half hour, they decided to go in a completely different direction. And the 18 months that we worked on it was kind of, for naught. We had to start all over from square one again. So as I said, the property owner is engaged with us, has been very interested in doing things. So if you've got some ideas for it, Cheryl would be happy to talk with you.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions or comments? I see no raised hands, so I am going to close public hearing G and move on to acknowledgements by council members. And so I'll start with Sam.
Hi there. Yeah, I got a few things to say here. Thank you. Really want to acknowledge the incredible community action. I'm sure a lot of people talk about this, the movement within the community to make Pride Month happen. There is incredible amount of work and support done by community members, which is great. A lot of people donated money to get the flags up. I also really want to draw a special thanks to Cammie Carter and John Hawley, who pretty much single-handedly built the Pride sculptures that are out and about, and Katie Quirk made the giraffe. It has been really awesome to see the support and also to see the pride, literally, that families have to take pictures with that. It's been a wonderful sort of melding of this community behind this. Also, the artists who painted windows, a lot of businesses have, but there have been a couple high school students that have done a number of the windows. They did a great job. I know Rachel Wingard is one. I don't know the name of the other artists, but anyway, I wanted to thank that. Also want to mention Artsapalooza, which is coming up, believe it or not, even in time of quarantine, this coming Saturday, June 20th from 5 to 8. It's going to be a traveling Artsapalooza. I call it Arts on the Mova, get it? And so the route has not been finalized yet, but you can check out their Facebook page, Stillwater Community Arts on Facebook. I'm sure we'll be promoting this as well. I also just want to acknowledge our colleague Meg for the work. She's sort of the kind of our go-to wordsmith when we, at least I go to when I'm having a hard time finding the right words for things. She's pretty consistent that way. Also want to acknowledge the work she did on the proclamation for Juneteenth. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to see that, but thank you for the work you put in on that. So that's it.
Thank you, Sam. Lori?
Yes, I want to acknowledge that the Supreme Court ruled today that discrimination against LGBTQIA people is unacceptable based on the 1964 Civil Rights Act, because the Civil Rights Act includes sex discrimination. And they ruled that exactly what happened to me 30 years ago when I worked for the Forest Service. And I want to thank my attorney at the time, Susan Kramer, her argument of why it was discrimination against me to say that my girlfriend could not come to my workplace, but everybody else's wife, husband, partner could come to the workplace. I was told it was creating a hostile workplace environment for me to be an out lesbian. And my attorney argued that if I were a man, my girlfriend would be welcome. So the very same argument just took 30 years to get to the Supreme Court. Since mine was a federal case, it was at the EEOC, and Clarence Thomas was in charge, and he wasn't interested in having class action suits. So it was an individual case. We changed the statute of the protected status for the federal government, USDA. They included sexual orientation in addition to sex. But it's kind of a big day for LGBTQ people because now they are are not allowed to be, that people are not allowed to discriminate against them in the workplace because they're gay. So it's really interesting that it came during Pride Month. And for me, it was, you know, I recall the 30 years ago when I wasn't allowed to have my partner come to my workplace, and was singled out for that. And so I don't really like being singled out because I'm a lesbian, when it doesn't have anything to do with what I'm doing at my job or my service. So I'm glad that that's now considered not acceptable in the whole federal government. So
Well,
I'm acknowledging
congratulations.
the support.
Thank you. Tom, do you have anything?
I do, if I can get unmute. Yeah, there I am. I would just like to acknowledge the hard work that our town manager and our department heads have put into this budget season. I think that Cheryl's comments earlier were right on target, that it's been a very unusual time. We've had to do some different things that we have not done before. And I just think the extra time and effort that has been put into it has been really appreciated.
Thank you, Tom. Megan?
Sure. I also want to echo some of Sam's comments. The group of different sort of stakeholders in the community that have come together to work on this Pride project in Orono has been really inspiring. A lot of people donating time and money and effort, and the painting crews that were all over. Friday, I was out painting a bunch of windows myself, but like a lot of kids from GSA at Orono High, and some students from the university, some staff members from the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and all of the amazing sculptures, the flags. I mean, just the community alone posting pictures with the hashtag Orono Pride 2020 have raised, at my last count this afternoon, it was over $1,300 for Maine Transnet. So, we're really excited about that. And I also want to acknowledge at the same time, and I referred to this a little bit at our last meeting, but the feedback has kept coming from the community, that there are also some folks out there who have approached council formally as a group, and I've also received private and personal comments from folks in town who are very excited to see the work that's been done to celebrate Pride Month. And they are very excited to see that those celebrations are largely intersectional. However, there's still an appetite in the community and a feeling that we also have, protests and unrests and, people really wanting to talk about structural racism and the experiences of Black people and people of color in America. And so there's been a lot of questions that we've received as a council and also as individuals of, can we show more support? Can we be more demonstrative in how we support those things? And I just wanted to bring that up because that really was the impetus behind drafting a proclamation for consideration tonight for Juneteenth. It was a suggestion put forward by a resident, and it echoes some of the comments that I've received personally, as I know other folks have. I also want to acknowledge there's a group forming called Equality Orono that you may have seen. You may have gotten a little flyer in your door where they're asking folks to log on to Facebook to connect, but also the ask that this group has is for more private citizens and business owners in town to make demonstrative statements and support, visual support of Black Lives Matter. So I want to acknowledge those folks for the work. They're trying to build off of what we've generated for Pride Month, and I commend them for that, and I will be participating in that as well. And for folks who are kind of wondering about, Juneteenth and why that was part of the conversation that residents asked us to maybe address, is just that it's a holiday that is often treated as a holiday that's for African Americans. And one of the arguments that's been made for years now is that there needs to be a push for it to be adopted everywhere. There needs to be a push for it to be adopted as a national holiday because it's important to recognize that, well, if folks want to look at
I'm going to kind of ask you to wrap up if you could.
It's late, and I guess I feel really passionately about this, as I know a lot of people out there in the community do, and I'm really sad that we didn't get to have a discussion about it tonight, especially because I believe that government shouldn't be reactionary, but it should be responsive, and I just want the folks who are really invested in this, I just want them to know that.
Thank you. Cheryl, do you have any?
Yes, I just wanted to remind people that absentee ballots are available now, that we should probably start thinking about getting some ballots. Also, that there is a hazardous waste day on the 20th as well. So if you have hazardous waste in your garage or cellar or whatever that you need to get rid of. I also want to say that I really appreciated Orono High School's graduation. For the seniors, they did a lot to try to make the kids feel included and to have some closure. And so it was a great effort for a kind of a tumultuous end to their careers here, their school careers here in Orono. So, and Orono will always be their hometown, so they'll always be back at some point.
Thank you. Terry?
Oh, hey. I actually had like a mindset, and then it kind of like got diverted tonight, because I will quickly say this, that I am an individual who left here, and I went to Alaska, and Juneteenth was a thing that was like huge, because, and since the 90s. So I am a bit disappointed we didn't do something, and that's just my own thing. We all can agree to disagree on this, but I felt that it was a statement we should make, but that's fine. But going further, I want to say that we spend a lot of time talking about people and things and stuff that goes on in our community. And this has been a tough time. It really has been a tough time. And I just want to say to my fellow counselors that I think you guys are all amazing. I think that we don't get enough conversations about how the difficulty of being an individual who's elected to this position and the significance of the importance of what we have to do. I don't think people quite get it. We may typically get the individuals who say, you should do this, you should do that. But I sometimes struggle with that people don't show up into our council chambers going like, Cindy, I am amazed by your ability to just navigate what we have to navigate in this town. And so I guess for me, for my big thing is I just want to let all my fellow counselors know that even though we agree, disagree, whatever, it's a tough position and you all do an amazing job, and I appreciate you all. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to unfinished business. I don't believe we have any. So I will ask for a motion to move the consent agenda with the exception of order 20-78.
So moved.
I saw Tom. Okay. Nancy, do you want, if you're still there, Nancy, will you take a roll call vote?
Yes. Counselor Coons?
In agreement? In approval?
Okay. Counselor Osher?
Approve.
Counselor Perry?
Approve.
Counselor Maynard?
Approve.
Counselor Gardner?
Approve.
Counselor Robertson?
In favor?
Counselor Grenier?
Approved.
And the vote was 7 in favor and there were none opposed.
Great, thank you. I am going to take order 20-78, but I do not have double screen, so if somebody could possibly read the motion that was suggested, all you tech savvy individuals. No, huh? Okay. Sam?
Sorry, it's order. Are you talking about order approving retailer's license for Burger King?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Do I have to read the whole thing or what?
Just why is it, it's conditioned for order, yes, if you would read the whole thing, please.
And I'm trying to find it. I just have the one line.
I think I have it.
Okay.
Order 2078. Order approving a victuals license for Burger King conditioned upon the treasurer's receipt of payment of outstanding personal property taxes and sewer use fees required by Town of Orono Ordinance, Chapter 29, Section 34B.
That was it. Perfect, Sam. I'll take a second on that.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay. Nance, would you take the roll call, please?
Sure. Counselor Coons?
Favor?
Counselor Osher?
In favor?
Counselor Perry?
In favor.
Counselor Maynard?
Sorry, in favor.
Counselor Gardner?
In favor?
Counselor Robertson?
In favor.
Counselor Grenier?
In favor.
And the vote is 7 in favor and there were none opposed.
Thank you. Moving on to new business, Order 20-86, order proclaiming the month of June as Pride Month in the town of Orono. We'll take a motion and a second, please.
Move approval.
Second.
Any discussion on this? I think we had a lot in acknowledgements, but there is a proclamation that council will be signing. And if there's nothing further from council.
I just want to thank Sophie and Meg and whoever else contributed to this document. I know we took, there was a great model of the Bangor proclamation that they've been using, but I think this really captures a lot of Orono's unique perspective as well. So thank you all.
If there's no other comments, I'll ask Nancy to take the vote, please.
All right. Counselor Coons?
In favor?
Counselor Osher?
In favor?
Counselor Perry?
In favor.
Counselor Maynard?
In favor.
Counselor Gardner?
Favor?
Counselor Robertson?
In favor.
Counselor Grenier?
In favor.
And the vote is 7 in favor and there are none opposed.
Thank you. Order 20-87, order approving the First Amendment to the EnvisionNet Municipal Development and Tax Increment Financing District. And I would ask for a waiver not to have to read the rest of the order. And if that's okay, then I will take a motion for approval of 2087.
Move approval.
Well, Sophie's yelling at me.
So according to Nancy, you need a motion, you need to formally waive reading of this one. So you need someone to move that they waive reading in the interest of the late hour of saving time. You get to fill in. And then that is not debatable. It needs a second, and then you would just move on to a vote, and you just need a simple majority.
Would you do
So
that, Tom?
I would move that we waive the reading of this order in because of the late hour.
Second.
Thank you. So Nancy, you have to take a vote on this waiving.
Yes. Counselor Coons?
In favor?
Counselor Osher?
In favor?
Counselor Perry,
In favor.
Counselor Maynard,
In favor.
Counselor Gardner,
In favor?
Counselor Robertson,
In favor?
Counselor Grenier,
In favor.
and the vote was 7 in favor and none opposed to waive the reading.
I thank my fellow counselors very much. I will now take a motion on order 20-87, please.
I will move approval again.
All right.
2087.
And a second? I think it's in second. Sophie, do we need any more conversation on this? All right. Does anyone wish to comment or have any questions on the TIF? I thought the explanation was very helpful.
Some of the language, I know we've cleaned language up in the past that was more gender specific, section 4 and section 6.
So it's pretty amazing that I work for a council. You would be the 4th counselor to bring that to my attention. We will, that's awesome. But before we sign it, I will clean that up so that it reflects me.
Thank you. And thank the other 3 too.
All right. Nothing else. Nancy, would you take the vote, please?
Sure. Counselor Coons,
In favor?
Counselor Osher,
Favor?
Counselor Perry,
In favor.
Counselor Maynard,
In favor?
Counselor Gardner,
In favor?
Counselor Robertson,
In favor?
Counselor Grenier.
In favor.
And the vote is 7 in favor and there are no opposition.
Thank you very much. Order 20-88, order accepting the Maine DEP 2020 Clean Water State Revolving Climate Adaptation Plan Principal Forgiveness Grant of up to $20,000 for WPCF. Authorize the town manager to execute all documentation with Maine DEP and the Maine Municipal Bond Bank necessary to secure said funds, and engaging Alvar Associates of Winterport to complete the project at an amount not to exceed $1,000. We'll take a motion, please.
Moved.
And a second. Thank you, Lord. Sophie?
So Joe Madigan is still on this meeting as an attendee, and if he needs to speak, he should let Belle know, but I'm gonna try to wing it in the interest of, there we go. So as Joe and I've talked with council already about, we had applied for this climate change planning grant, and we had not received funding. We did, in late May, we received notice that a number of people didn't accept their funding, and so there was money available to us. So this grant will allow us to work with Alvar and have them identify the impacts that climate change is having, and help us come up with a plan for WPCF and how we would address it. The way this is structured, we take debt from the bond bank and then they forgive it when the project is over. So there is zero net cost to the town to participate, and I think what we'll get will be a really nice first try at a plan, and one that we should then be able to have a pretty good blueprint for how to do this for for the town infrastructure as well.
Sophie, do you know why this grant is structured this way? That it's a grant, but you have to borrow money to get?
It's usually tied with a
Seems unusual.
construction project that you would get funded through the bond bank. So they're usually two elements of it. Because people didn't take it, we don't have a construction project, but they will let us do it. It's just the setup. Anyone else have any questions or comments?
All right, I think it's a good idea. So Nancy, please take the vote.
Counselor Coons,
In favor?
Counselor Osher,
Favor?
Counselor Perry,
In favor?
Counselor Maynard,
In favor?
Counselor Gardner,
Favor?
Counselor Robertson,
In favor.
Counselor Grenier.
Favor.
Okay, and the vote is 7 in favor, and there were none opposed.
Great, thanks, Nance. Order 20-89, order authorizing the town manager to enter into an agreement with Oliver Associates of Winterport for engineering services for the Mill Street Sanitary Storm Sewer Separation with funds drawn from the Downtown and Transit-Oriented TIF District Program Development Fund. I will take a motion, please.
So moved.
All right.
Second?
Sophie, you got anything on this? Yeah, so we briefly talked about this during the budget process, and we've talked with council in workshop about this as well. But on the corner of Mill Street, the properties that abut Main Street and then Mill Street there is a catch basin that sits in the privately owned portion of the Pine Street parking lot, so right up next to the buildings. That catch basin collects an awful lot of water that's coming down off the roofs and in that area. That catch basin is connected to the sanitary sewer system. So when it rains or when there's a lot of snow melt, that water is making its way into the sanitary system. In accordance with our CSO master plan objectives, once we learned about it, we then looked at how we could potentially fix that problem. Joe Madigan worked with Rob Yerxa and Mandy Oliver, I think it was Mandy, and designed a separation project where they will disconnect that catch basin from the sanitary sewer manhole, and they will run it across Mill Street down to the catch basin on the corner of Mill and Main, so kind of over by where Pat's Park is, and connect it into the catch basin there. It's going to be about $110,000, and we're suggesting that money would come from the Downtown and Transit-Oriented TIF District. Based on the conversations that we had with the town council during the budget process and the fact that the funds are sitting in the Downtown and Transit-Oriented TIF District, Joe went ahead and added that project in with the package of FY20 projects that are slated to be constructed this summer. So he's got some small projects, and this will allow us to hopefully get a better mobilization fee by putting them all together. That has gone out to bid, but nothing has been awarded yet. You would do that likely at your July meeting. That's what I have. Joe should feel free to add if you'd like.
Will this require opening the road? So we're going to resurface Mill Street once again.
Well, we won't resurface the whole thing. We'll try to cut and blend it in as best we can, but it will be a patch. And different part of Mill Street. Just.
Oh, okay. Any other questions or comments?
Hope it works.
All right. Nancy, would you take a vote, please?
Counselor Coons,
In favor.
Counselor Osher,
In favor?
Counselor Perry,
In favor?
Counselor Maynard,
In favor?
Counselor Gardner,
In favor?
Counselor Robertson,
In favor.
Counselor Grenier.
In favor.
And the vote is 7 in favor, and there were none opposed.
Okay. Order 20-90, Order authorizing the town manager to enter into an agreement with Connectivity Point Design and Installation LLC of Auburn for town office structured CAT6 cabling not to exceed $16,000 to be drawn from the approved FY20 capital facilities budget. Take a motion, please.
Move approval.
Second.
Thank you. And it says Bell or Sophia.
Should be Belle. This is hers.
So this is the project that we have, we talked about last year during the budget season. We need to recable the town office. While we do have Cat6 cabling within the office, it's very disorganized and it doesn't terminate in the correct place. And we found a lot of trouble when we try to go through and troubleshoot some of our breakdowns. This goes through, it demos the old cabling and puts in new cabling, and also the cabling that was left in the wall and the ceilings from the Cat5 installation that was in there before. So it's a modernization and updating project. Everything will be properly labeled and terminated and done by a certified contractor.
Great. Belle, will this require opening up any walls, or is it all done through the ceilings? And
It's mostly done through the ceilings. Any walls where we can't actually fish it through using either existing cabling or a snake, we plan to just put an exterior cable conduit rather than trying to saw into the drywall, patch it, and add that extra expense and noise and dust and dirt.
anyone else have any questions or comments? Given this time, I think it's probably appropriate to update internet services. Nance, if you would take a vote, please.
Counselor Coons,
In favor?
Counselor Osher,
In favor?
Counselor Perry,
In favor?
Counselor Maynard,
In favor?
Counselor Gardner,
In favor?
Counselor Robertson,
In favor.
and Counselor Grenier.
In favor?
And the vote is 7 in favor, and there were none opposed.
Thank you. Moving on to council committee representative reports. We've all been kind of busy in budget, but I will check to see if there's anybody that has a report. Raise your hand.
Yeah, Orono Historical Society, I ran into Terry, Terry Morrow, and the Orono Historical Society obviously is not meeting in person or electronically. They're hopeful for the fall, but we'll see.
Anyone else?
Actually, Cindy, I would report from the Finance Committee, just for the record, that you and I met with the auditors by Zoom as they're doing their pre-audit work, and got a very positive report on the material that was available for them and the cooperation that we're getting from town staff, and that things are going very smoothly.
Great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Moving on to a future agenda items and items of concern, and trying to remember where people sit. So I'm going to work backwards and start with Terry.
I have nothing. Thank you, though.
Cheryl?
I'd like to put on a work plan at some point when we get to this. One of my concerns is lack of process for this last proclamation, and that I think that council as a group really needs to have a really thoughtful discussion on policy and how we determine what's a proclamation and how we determine what we're going to put out as a group, and with some very clear direction. And I'd like to put that down as a future item, but as in a work plan possibly.
Sure, Megan.
I'm all set, thanks.
Okay. Tom,
All set.
Lori,
All set.
Sam?
I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay. Sophie, I would love an update closer to the end as to where we ended up with this budget. In June 30th, like, are we going to make it? All right. Public petitions. I see no raised hands. And soon I've lost my page. Public comments. I still see no raised hands unless, oh, Sophie has a raised hand.
I have just a couple of quick things if I could. Could counselors please get me, or Cindy, I think me, your work plan ideas, because that's the next thing we're going to be looking at, and I'd like to begin to work on a document for that. I have a brief update on where we are with Parks and Rec and the boat launch and Neto Savoy, so I thought I'd give you a quick heads up. So Gould's Landing, which is the boat launch, is open to the public. No permits are required. Vehicles with boat trailer parking only. There are 5 spots for them. We are creating 2 spots for boat launch only parking, and the parking is coming as a first come, first served basis. Neto Savoy, we intend to open back up to permit parking only. That's 13 spots. Permits are available to residents for free, and they will only be available to residents while we're working through COVID-19 and we evaluate the use of the park to make sure that there's plenty of space for people. Parking there is on a first come, first served basis, and there is no guarantee of parking because you have the permit. So if you have a permit, it just means if there's a space, you can park. We are hoping that mid to late week, Public Works will be able to make the structural changes out there, and we'll be able to get hopefully permanent signage, but if not, temporary signage up to allow people to enjoy the park. Parks and Recreation this summer, staff has been working very hard, and with the University of Maine as well. We are getting ready to unveil Summer Recess, which is a 6-week program, 1 day a week with a rain date, because it has to be outside. We don't have spaces big enough to be able to do stuff inside in accordance with CDC guidance yet. It's a field day with free play games with supervision. We're thinking 1-hour time slots with small groups of 10, but it really depends on how many people come. The goal with this is to try to keep it as flexible as possible so that we can see what the community needs and is asking for and change the program as needed. We will be following CDC guidelines. So if for example, CDC says no gameplay. So we won't be doing things where people will be running into each other and around people. We're trying to find some socially distanced games, and some of the stuff's pretty creative. The other thing that they're planning to do is use our partners that that provide programming for us during regular time. And we're looking for some more special event or special activities like bike riding, skills-based clinics for some sports, hiking, just getting people outdoors and enjoying the world in a socially distanced way, and possibly some community events. So I think Mitch and his team are working diligently to try to come up with a new normal for Parks and Rec. And the goal here is to be able to get feedback and to weigh that feedback and be able to pivot if we need to, because ultimately whatever we do needs to work for the community. That's
So
what I have.
where will the community find the information on these?
So
You're muted.
Belle and Mitch are working together to get the information out, but we'll put it out on Facebook and we'll also put it on the website. Depending on how it all comes together, we might think about postcards or a special edition of the Orono Observer. I'm not 100% sure about that, and I need to look at the budget to make sure that I'd rather spend the money providing the service than sending out a mailer for it.
So there's no fee for this service? Or for
So
this?
we're going back and forth. If we can do it with our existing people, then I'm thinking that there is a really strong possibility that we can do it for free. But if I need to be hiring an additional supervisor out there, then we're going to have to think about a nominal fee to cover that cost. But not like a summer day camp.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. All right. I wanted to thank Council for all of your hard work on the budget. It's been a long couple of weeks. I believe we have the rest of the week off, and we'll meet next Monday to talk about work plan, maybe?
Sure.
Okay. And I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Nancy, I'm going to take this one by vote of hands. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Right.